Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill him! Kill them both! No, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
Okay, Joshua, what's up?
Hey, Jen.
I know I kind of gave you a deadpan opening, even though we actually had been speaking at length about alchemy, and you were getting into some very interesting material, and you had also sent me an outline of things that you were going to discuss. I mean, I'll be more listening, but obviously we'll be engaged a little bit. So I think that what is interesting about you is I feel like you're my equal in many ways, where you're looking at these very similar things. You're familiar with like this broader overarching concept of plus ultra, which a lot of people have a hard time sort of wrapping their heads around. And then there's the parafiction angle, and I've done a little bit on like Twitter on doing the Aeon of the Daughter. So, but you're kind of familiar with it, so you kind of understand like my broader perspective, and bringing like this postmodern magic, this kind of like maybe we'll say chaos inspired Vajra Buddhism mixture that is also on social media, that's also on the show, that's also like part of my life now, I guess. And you kind of see the greater project because you have your own metaphysics that you're very fluent in and you're very comfortable with. So why don't you, I'm sorry, that was a really long, meandering way to introduce you, but I just wanted to say that I'm just going to speak very plainly. We'll just talk about Kabbalah, and if people don't get it, that's okay. Or people talk about alchemy, and if people don't get it, that's okay. It'll just be between us, and anyone who's listening, it's like a third party. So please introduce yourself, Joshua.
Hey, man, and don't worry. Like I said before, you apologize too much. So, yeah, man, I've been studying for many years, but I think one of the things, like you said, I often hear that kind of thing when I meet somebody. They'll think that it's like refreshing or something because I have a totally different perspective with my faith than you often find. And I think it's been colored by a lot of the experiences I've had in my life, but also the fact that, I choose and follow the right-hand path, but I was actually born left-handed. So all my life I've been, approaching things, as they say, ass backwards or whatever. And I kind of feel like that's been my approach with religion too. But one of the things that always marked my religious faith was great faith. And so I think there was a part of me that approached religion always from a much different way, because I wasn't wanting to blindly follow. I wanted to understand my faith. And so I would pray for wisdom and things like that when I was young. And I feel like where I've been led to now is, you said, meandering is a really good word for that, because I feel like I've kind of been walking that Zen path, or the garden path, or those sorts of analogies could apply here, where it's taken me a lot of places I'd never thought I would be. But because of that, I have a very eclectic understanding of things, and I started to realize that there was a lot of patterns across all the different cultures, and that a lot of us, which I never got until the internet came around, because I'm 39, so some of this stuff I didn't really get to start studying deeply until the internet. But I've been able to have fellowship with people a lot more these past few years, and that's really been helping too, because it's hard to find people in your community that you can talk to about things like this. I'm sure that everybody listening to this is probably has felt that way at various times in their life. So, but yeah, because of that, I've always leaned on God heavily to teach me things. And so for me, whenever I hear people talk, I always kind of filter it through my own lens. And it's a compliment to hear you say I'm your equal in some ways or whatever, because when I hear you talk about the Asian faiths, I'm like, wow, I have no idea what he's talking about, except sometimes I do. But because those names and stuff are also unfamiliar, and it's kind of tedious, but it reminds me of the all the different angels and stuff too, and I'm learning about them now. So it's not really any different, because again, they're all the same in a way, So, but today we'll be talking about in terms of paths, we will be talking about some paths on the Kabbalah tree, the Sephiroth, and how this might relate to some other topics and other cultures, like the Bifrost, the roots of Yggdrasil, the lightning path, or the serpent path that's on the Kabbalah. After I joined this space with you guys, I've really been having epiphanies about, I just got a catalog of things in my head, and you guys will start having conversations, and it'll start causing a brainstorm in my head of all these things. It's like, oh, so one of the things I wanted to bring up because of that was the, I've seen the serpent kind of draped on the Sephiroth, and sometimes also with the sword kind of going down through it. And I thought, oh, dude, that's actually a path, you're going from this Sephiroth to that Sephiroth, and then from here to here to here to here. And so that was one of the things I wanted to look at today. It was just things that might be the same thing, but across different cultures. So what is it really trying to achieve? I think that's something that we can look into. Are we actually engaged in a human instrumentality project? And maybe Elon's part of Nerve or something like that, like, who knows? Maybe we're in the midst of some type of grand alchemical experiment.
I think that that's true. I think this, that I believe. I believe that. Well, it's okay. So I just blank slate. We have free will. We're here. So what do we make of it? What do we do with it? I know that's not like it's not the, everybody wants like this answer that is like the grand design answer. My answer is very simple. We're here. Let's do something with it. Let's like live our life as the great work. And what does that mean? That also means like having secret knowledge. So I think that at least synthesizing that into, it's melding both the right and the left together, but it's not about the extreme. Of course, you have to counterbalance any action taken on the opposing pillar or the opposing polarity. I agree with that. But I think it's also about like rectifying the path so it's like a usable, not just a magician's tool. And because I am a Buddhist, so I do think of it more as like we have to follow the middle pillar because this is the way it's laid out. This makes sense. This is like it's very synthetic. It's like it's related to our consciousness. It's related to our perception of the elements, perception of the Sephira. This seems to be what the sages are saying. This seems to be what like the Magi are saying. This is what a lot of tantrics say, not all tantrics, but some. And but there does seem to be like a discordance of terminus, of where specific theologies or cosmologies, they have different foci, like I want to say foci, I don't know. Anyways, they have different focuses of where they want to, like where they, I call it like worshiping. It's like a face of the Sephirah. It's like the deity who, it's just the what they perceive that, and so that is what arises there. That's kind of how we would think of it in a Buddhist way. So I think that that's true, though. I think that different cultures have different kinds of, they have different implications with their thinking and their consciousness and their sort of way of navigating this like inner, you could call it the inner world. So I think that that explains some discrepancies between the different systems that are clearly also perennial or also part of maybe one original sort of wisdom science, maybe the original wisdom science, maybe the Hyperborean wisdom science. So I think that's probably the case. That seems to be true in my opinion, that broadly. And I know that you are interested in the Yggdrasil and the way that that tree sort of is different and also related and perhaps rectifiable through maybe a more non-dual understanding. Is that accurate to say, Joshua? Or maybe not even non-dual, but you're looking at it in a way that you're seeing some of like the critiques that I've, not just me, but I've made and maybe other people have made, and you're saying, okay, there is a way to parse this.
Yeah, it can be rectified. There's a character that comes to mind when you were talking about that, because that choice word right there, that rectification. I was playing Elden Ring, and there was a tortoise pope, just a giant turtle that wears a mitre. But anyway, he teaches both sorcery and incantations, which is like the faith-based. So you got intelligence, magic, and faith miracles. Well, he's the only character where you can learn both from. And what he actually did was he wed a great sorcerer, or sorceress rather, to the faith leader. And so he actually performed a wedding there. And to me, that's very esoteric in the sense that it was like the divine wedding of intellect and wisdom being brought together. And there's a lot of things hidden like that in video games and anime and whatnot. And I think because they use those archetypes, it makes it really rich. It's tapping into something inside of us that we maybe don't even know that's there sometimes. And that's what makes good storycraft, right? Is when they're tapping into these things. But that example alone, when you're engaged in dialogue with that turtle, or tortoise, excuse me, to any of you tortoise enthusiasts out there that might be offended by my misappropriation of the species. So he talks about how all things can be reconciled into themselves, and that really even blasphemies can be folded into the truth somehow, because they actually add to your depth of understanding, even if they're wrong. And I think that's the true essence of the right and left hand path, is that the right hand path is kind of like this prescribed recipe for achieving Keter. And then the left hand path is one that may not end with success. It could be wrought with failure, perhaps. But what I do suspect is that there are some examples of what I think are left hand paths, kind of like the Nordic tree, for instance. It could be an example of this, because to me, sometimes like the God of the Bible, Yahweh, I see a lot of similarities between him and Jehovah, Jove, in the Greek, and also with some of the Sumerian deities, and then also with the Nordic traditions. Now, he's not as different as you would think, because Odin and Thor have this relationship with lightning and storms, just like Baal and Yahweh and all the others. So and one of the more peculiar similarities is how, at least with Odin and Yahweh, well, actually, and Jupiter, Jove, they all stood in opposition to the giants. And so a lot of my approach to these types of things is kind of from the axiom of reaping and sowing and being able to judge a tree by its fruits and things like that. So when I see similar fruit, I have to wonder, well, do they have a common root? And so when you see these types of similarities in their behavior and their belief structures, and I start to wonder, like, well, what is the how far back does this similarity go? You know, where do the branches occur and why? And so for me, the Yggdrasil having the orbs above and the branches, that is very much like the Sephiroth, or the fruits of the tree. And then the Yggdrasil also features the lower spheres with the roots. And so that is so strikingly similar to a lot of the, occult, esoteric pictures you'll see of the Sephiroth, is that it'll be a canopy, and then have roots below where I can never pronounce that word, klipa, where they reside.
So I'll just jump in here and say that
Sure.
I was not able to do a lot of the Hebrew pronunciation at first, but I have been a little more careful. But yeah, klipa is the more like Yiddishy way to say it. I think that's what Sachi explained to me. So that's why I say it like that. But I think it is like there's different. I've heard different left-hand path authors like describe it differently. Some people say kleepoth, like very with a Q, like very emphasizing that sound, or some people say clipoth, which I think is incorrect. But I've said that, so I can't really criticize them. But I like klipa just because it's easy, it's quick, it's like one less syllable, and I don't worry about it being right or wrong. But that's just my advice.
I like that one because it's easy, it's quick, like you said, and it's unique. Like it's not easily confused with another word. But what I used to call it was the quillipot, because I would say the Sephiroth and quillipot. So for me, it was easy to remember the two if I made them sound similar. But yeah, I've always struggled with the pronunciations. But as long as we all know what we're talking about, I guess
100%
matters, right? But yeah, so for me, comparing these cultures and their more esoteric, mystical components, you start to see like that similarity. And this is what really helped me start to develop an appreciation for the Twilight language. And for that matter, any culture that developed a Twilight language, because Hebrew had one. Their language was inspired by constellations and stars. They have the Sephiroth, Klipa design. The Nordics have theirs. They also have the runes. And then, of course, your father figure, Odin, was who got the logos, so the word. And Christianity or Judaism, you got the father who associates with the word. And what I also think is curious, and why I wonder too if this is like maybe an inversion or mirror or something, left hand, a path, maybe it's the same, maybe it's not inverted, but the left hand and right hand path still apply here, because Odin kind of does his own crucifixion type ritual when he hangs from the tree as the hanged man. And I think he does it for 9 days. So Christ's endeavor is like 3 days. Odin does a thing for 9 days, but hangs upside down. And then so it kind of implies that Klipa thing. So maybe the runes would maybe relate more to the Klipa, and like Hebrew would be more of a Sephiroth thing. I'm not sure, but I think you could probably map them out to the whole tree and roots both. They probably have a lot more similarities and differences, because I think there's about an approximate similar number too, because depending on the Futhark alphabet, there's different numbers of the letters, but Hebrew has 22, and there's 22 paths on the Sephiroth. So you see what I mean? Like, I think if you looked at it and thought about it hard enough, you could probably find all the correspondences, like what each rune associates with what Hebrew letter. And from that point on, it would be pretty simple to just like map it all out, right? So I guess one of my goals is to try and create like a Rosetta Stone of sorts where I got like maybe Sumerian, Egyptian, Nordic, Hebrew, Hindu, so on and so forth, and try to have like a correspondence chart, you know, so that when you're reading something or looking at something, you can be like, oh, okay. So you start to notice the threads that are kind of similar, or the archetypes. And I think that way we can actually develop a deeper appreciation for these other cultures that are all embracing the Vedas, the verses, but in their own way.
I totally agree with you. Okay, so I think you also know this, that I think that there's a relationship between Rudra and Jehovah as a storm god, or Rudra and Baal, or Rudra and Baal Hadad, or whichever one, you know, got syncretized into that god.
Even Indra, for that matter.
There is an element, because there's also an element, they even say this in the Puranas. That's what's so interesting about the Puranas. People way underestimate the Puranas. They think it's some village like Jeet story. It's not that. It's like, it's deep. It's like retelling the story in like almost science fiction. And that's what makes it cool. That's what makes it like, it almost makes the Puranas like a little magic, to be honest with you. So there is like a Twilight, like you're saying, there is a Twilight language. Like that's a tantric concept. Like we have that idea. Like I think it even probably comes from Tantra. Maybe not obviously always contained in Tantra, but I think that originally it because it's such an it's such an innate concept. It's also an innate concept in Hebrew. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do think, I don't know if you, and I meant to ask you if you've read the Thomas Carlson book, because I've read it personally, and I don't agree 100% with his attributions and the way he understands like the tree of knowledge, we'll say, instead of the tree of death. But I think that he gives an interesting sort of framework or groundwork. He lays the groundwork, at least for like a discussion of what the tree should look like. And I think that's even what you're saying in like a way, like we need to have a discussion and see like the comparisons, and see like how this is more one thing than it's two separate things. And I think there's something interesting also about Lurianic Kabbalah, is that they posit that the tree of life and the tree of death obviously exists. Like they both exist. But in Buddhism, we would just consider it to be non-dual. So yes, there's two trees if you want to conceptually think of it like that, but everything that arises in the upper Sephirah, it can also be like aggregate. It can also be like a skanda. It can also be a klipa. So it can contain negative qualities, but that has a lot to do with your consciousness. So I think I'm a good person, actually, Joshua, to speak to about sort of the integration, or at least having a discussion about what that looks like, because I don't really look at it like, I don't look at it dualistically. I try not to. I try and look at it very non-dual.
Well, yeah, and so for me, that's always been the kind of like the Hermetic principles approach to things. You know, that stuff should be taught in school, honestly, in my opinion, even if it was just an elective philosophy class that you could take, because those Hermetic principles, for instance, based on, even if one's not a fan of dualism or whatever, but just the principles of gender and this, that, and the other, it helped frame my understanding of the world in a different way, because then when I would approach like a new idea or anything, really, I had something to measure it against, and I could be like, well, does it satisfy these Hermetic laws? Is it similar or different to some of these other systems, you know? And so I really developed an appreciation for that. And I think that came from like the study in the Thoth and Atlantis and tablets of Thoth and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of where I got into the Hermetic laws and such, because it had that nice ring to it, you know. Like I thought, man, this is a really excellent tool to use, you know, when you're approaching these things. And I think honestly, if more people had those tools, we'd have a lot less conflict among all the belief systems too, because we'd be seeking to reconcile with one another and actually understand, like, we're all trying to earn a crown here.
Yeah, 100%. That's what this is all about. That's what this life's all about. Like, people, I think that we should actually go. I'm so trad, I guess, hermeticist, that I think that we should just go back. That's what we should teach. Like, but it's alongside science. It's alongside math. It's alongside literature. It's alongside language. It's like, it's part of the canon. And to ignore it, I think, is a huge mistake. Not just for Western culture, because obviously I do have a more Eastern orientation, we'll say. But like, the people that I'm engaged with, like on Twitter sometimes, are Eastern or Indian, at least. They have no idea. They have no idea. They don't even understand the outer of the outers. They wouldn't even be able to cross the outer gate of a temple, because this is like, it's like the simplest principle is completely foreign to them. I'm not saying they can't learn it. I'm just saying that they don't have it. But so I think but I think this is also a problem in Western culture, to be honest. I think that there are some people who clearly have the understanding. There are people who clearly do, triangle of manifestation, wear the right tie color, hit all the right spots with their PR picture, all of that. That's all true. But it would benefit people, not just in an esoteric way, like not about getting what you want in a magical way, but I think it would benefit people just generally being like, yeah, you can actually alter reality to a degree, maybe not 100%, but you can sort of open the road for manifestation, if you want to call it that. I don't usually use that word, but I'm just, as a broad word, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
And you're opening the road for yourself to have things happen that you're also doing. You're doing the formulation with what you're doing, colors, gesture, words, thoughts, prayer, practice. And then you're also integrating that into your life so you can open the road for those things to manifest or arise. So I think this would benefit most people, to be honest, like most people who are interested. If you're just interested in the outer temple stuff or not even knowing anything, that's okay, but it's definitely not for you. Like, I think if you have that aversion right away, it's probably not for someone. Because those are the people that always take it and misuse it, in my opinion. That's just, maybe I'm being a little pearl clutching. But
I agree.
but I think that people could integrate it. I think there's like a way for the normie to. I do think that there is. I'm more everyman or the every mason. That's sort of like how I think now. Like, I'm sort of like, yeah, let's take a little of that chaos magic, like Wild West spirit. That doesn't have to be our ethos, like our governing ontology. But I do kind of like that, and I think it's kind of American to, like, have that thing where you're kind of like in a dialectical dance with the dragon, and you're like, okay, like, I'm gonna see how far I can take this without going way overboard.
Well, and that's you dancing reminded me of David. He danced for God too. And so this right hand approach, which was like kind of like my fundamental basis for things, I wanted to understand it better. I didn't want to be kept in the outer court, like you were kind of saying, and so I feel like that approach to the inner court is almost like a left-handed approach in a sense, because the clergy don't want you to approach the altar, so to speak. Mm-hmm. They want to keep distance between you and God. Mm-hmm. And so left-hand path a lot of times gets a bad rep, but I've kind of said it before, and other times, like in the Christian theology anyhow, Lucifer is seen as the adversary or rebellious one. But if we live in his kingdom now, then those who are returning to God, experiencing Shuva, they are now the rebels in his kingdom. And so I think it's kind of been flipped on its head, where you almost have to walk the left-hand path to a degree, or otherwise you stay mired in the Maya or illusion of the outer court of religion. Because if they had it their way, we wouldn't even have Bibles, you know? So like just the fact, and that's something that people don't even appreciate, I don't think, is the fact that they can have a Bible in their home, because it used to be Bibles were chained to the wall and there was only so many of them, and you had to go to church and be told what to think and believe. And I've even noticed this too with the Orthodox. I know you got a little bit of a background with the Greek Orthodox. So what I would say about my time there was I noticed even when I went to the Antiochian and the Greek, it seemed like bringing your Bible was discouraged. I think everybody had a Bible naturally. Not that these people weren't pious. It's just it didn't seem encouraged, because you would come and let the priest kind of spoon feed you the sermon or whatever, and you didn't question it or anything. You know, you just and I just thought that was so remarkably different from how I was brought up in a Baptist church, where everybody had a Bible and it was hell and brimstone, you know. And see, that's left-hand path, because the law is the left-hand path. And so modern day Christianity's kind of thrown the law out and it's went full right-hand path. And it's like we've abused the right-hand path, because when Christ does return, is he going to recognize his church? He's certainly not going to be celebrating Christmas, for instance.
No.
So it's like, and the left-hand path, being those commandments and laws, involves the feast days, for instance. Like, here's the holidays that are prescribed and we would like you to do, and God has actually commanded us to do, and Christ walked that path. So this left-hand path through the Sephiroth, he walked a certain path of his own, right? But and why I wanted to bring up this serpent thing is because he tells us, in John, we're told that he says to his disciples, I have to be raised up like the serpent in the wilderness. When we read Numbers, the brazen serpent is erected in the wilderness to stave off these flying serpents, which were plaguing the Hebrews, biting them and stuff. Basically seraphim, if they're winged serpents. I mean, that would qualify as seraphim.
Absolutely.
And so their solution to that, they petitioned Yahweh, and he's like, okay, do this and they'll leave you alone, you know. Well, Christ says he has to be raised up like the serpent in the wilderness at that time. So his sacrifice on the cross, that great work that he achieved, is mimicking that. And I think that that's really wild, because part of his path included keeping all those commandments and dying in that purified state. So he was very charged, in a sense. It's like right and left-hand path together. And the Bible tells us that we're not supposed to do just the left or just the right, but to walk the middle. And I think that's often overlooked. And I think that that's led to things like the, Christmas, for instance, is a great example of this, where it's a non-biblical holiday. And I really appreciate what you had to say about why not make it in March or April, because it would certainly make a lot more sense. And I'm sure the Orthodox Church would love it. More reasons to celebrate Pascha, right? So, because they get like mad energized around that time of year. But you know, that's the sort of thing we see when we stray from the structure that's offered by Saturn in this sense. It's like the human body wouldn't be much at all without the skeleton. The skeleton adds structure and strength to an otherwise useless lump of flesh. So the right hand only is like not having a skeleton, you know?
Okay, so I'm so glad that you brought this up, Joshua, because for me, I often speak about this, how I do not like to frame Saturn as negative, evil. No, I think that to take it more in I'll just say it, I know it's annoying, but like the non-dual view, I think is so much better. Yes, it's ferocious. Yes, it's like a time king. We have the same idea in Buddhism, no big deal. He's ferocious, he's fixed in space, he's sitting on his carnal throne, he's laughing. The laughter, as you pointed out on that Christmas space, was that laughter is such a powerful, it's actually a sacred bija. I didn't even explain it because I didn't want to in a space, but I was thinking like that'll be something interesting that I can discuss with him later. It's like a laughing that it, the echo is sort of like the reality, the consciousness that keeps us in, it keeps us within that boundary, that structure. That's not bad. That's the method. That's the text written down, as you said. So we need that. But then you have the sola scriptura, which goes like way too far left-hand path. And we can see a lot of left-hand path people historically in the last 200 years have come from these very much more Calvinist sort of like informed traditions where they do have more of a sola scriptura view. They do have more of a doctrine of degradation view. So that's probably wrong too. I think we can safely say that. But then we also, and I do have an issue with the Greek Orthodox or the Eastern Orthodox in general for saying that the world is death. We do not believe that in Tantra. So they may believe that. That might be their framing. But for me, I think the world is both. I think as you've heard me always say, it's both the smashana and the garden at the same time. So it is like we have to reconcile both of that within our own consciousness rather than it's not about the rejection. It's not fully Gnostic in that way. It's not about like a rejection of the material or the form. It's about like the embrace of things, but with like a moderation. And so I also appreciate that you said that about the reading of the Bible in the Greek Orthodox Mass, even in the Antiochian Mass. And I also wanted to ask you if you chose the Antiochian Church because of Saint Cyprian of Antioch, because he's a particular interest of mine. So. Yeah, I think that that's really interesting because that is very Hesed, right? Like that's very, you are the hearers. We are telling you, like we are the voice, we are the institutional structure, but also like the voice of mercy. And through that sort of like supernal ocean of knowledge that's contained within our skulls, like we are the ones who will portion out to you the sort of the word. So I think that that's wrong too, because you're relying on someone else's consciousness. And like, I'm a big fan of like just doing like you just read the text for yourself, you do the practices, and you get it done. Like, if you need outside opinion, that's okay. If it's like your teacher or that's if someone you trust or whatever, or someone that's higher or clergy. But I think for the most part, you have to just follow the text and follow the method. And I think that that's really what people are lacking. This is my opinion. That was a little harsh.
Well, and it's not too harsh because, we're given an instruction manual. That's what the word of God is. And I feel like Orthodox Christianity likes to make the claim that they're the OG, they've not changed anything. And it's like, well, wait a second.
Well,
weren't the apostles and disciples actually Jewish, and they didn't practice Christmas and all the stuff that we're doing today? So like, where did all this stuff come from? And I feel like that too is a big places a big emphasis on the left and right hand divide, is that we've ran so hard away from our roots in Judaism, the left hand part of it, and embraced solely the right hand path. It's like we forget the fact that Christ himself was a Jew and he didn't tell us to start all these new holidays and feast days. And I think that is an error. And I'm afraid that it really pains me too, because a lot of the people that I met in these churches were really good people. They were embodying a lot of the separo that you would expect to see in the body of Christ, and Hesed, etc. But what they were lacking a lot of times was wisdom. And I think it's because they aren't actually practicing the word. They're in these vain traditions. And even in the Greek church that I was attending at the time, I stopped attending the Antiochian right before Christmas started. So I don't know if they were engaging in it or not, but the Greek church had a Christmas tree in it. and I was just so disgusted. I couldn't, do it. So that's one of the reasons I stopped going there. But I mean, I didn't leave on bad terms or anything like that. It's just Irish goodbye kind of thing. It's like, you just don't see me again, not going to have words with them or anything like that. But it did bother me because they kind of did lean into the vaccination stuff and the mask stuff and the Christmas stuff. And it's like, guys, we're supposed to be, the meaning of holy is to be set apart. We're not supposed to be doing what the rest of the world is,
I totally agree.
I feel like it's created a momentum that's really hard. The momentum of Leviathan. That is like, that's a good title for a book. That Ouroboros, like rolling down the hill, it's got so much momentum. How can you stop it? And this was something that Christ was even dealing with in his time, and the apostles. I mean, there was a lot of strange traditions going on at that time, and this ritual with the communion wafer really sums it up, because in both churches I noticed that they served leavened bread with communion, and it puzzled me. I thought, why, if communion's actually the Last Supper during Passover, you wouldn't be eating leavened bread. You would be eating flat bread because of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But because we've departed from the Feast of Unleavened Bread as part of God's word in the Old Testament and manufactured these new holidays, we've now lost that. And so now we're eating leavened bread, maybe not even wine. It might be grape juice or whatever. So here's my question that I pose to the church broadly is, what kind of shepherd are you? Are your parishioners actually receiving a crown? Are you giving them watered down rituals that don't actually follow the prescription? It's like trying to put something together without reading the instruction manual. The odds are you're going to mess something up. You start doing your own thing, putting a bolt here where it shouldn't be, who knows? It doesn't function the way it's intended, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the way God operates. He done everything with blueprints and plans. He didn't just conjure it up and be like, we'll see how it goes. He didn't build the airplane as he was flying it, so to speak. And this is one of the concepts that's important with Aries coming before Taurus, is the thoughts and the blueprints occurred in the mind of God before it was spoken into existence. And I think that is sometimes lost again, because we've gotten so far away from these truths. But because of that, I think we're missing out on the mystery. Like, these people are coming to church and maybe not being fed the way they should be, because we don't really know why the leaven should or shouldn't be in there, but let's just assume that unleavened bread and wine, maybe that's a necessary ingredient for some type of discernment, third eye activation, crown chakra activation. Yeah. I was talking on the space last night about the importance of the culture, and the bread yeast, that too contains like that's going to be different from community to community, and so your culture kind of refers to your bread and stuff too. And so what I mean is, we've made so many little tweaks and changes to all of this, and food's even sterile. It's like the communion wafer isn't what it's supposed to be. The wine is so symbolic in the Bible. Where did that come from? Walmart, whatever. It's like we aren't reaping the grapes from the vine and making the wine. We're not creating the bread and thinking like, oh, this is the body of Christ. We don't want sin in our church, so we don't want leaven in our communion wafers, right?
I
So like,
totally agree with you, Joshua. But let me say something in defense of the Tradcast and the Ortho Bros.
Yeah,
so when
sure.
it was coming up, as you know this, so it's not anything new to you, but for people listening, they do use wine in mass. So, but you're right, it's like, does it come from Walmart? But I think the Orthodox Church is very specific on, as far as I know, they have like very specific suppliers, and the Catholic Church used to be, but I have no idea, because it's been a very long time since I have been like any kind of part of like that
Well,
theological.
aside from that, it should be it should simply be kosher. I mean, they could simply do that and avoid any issues, you know, because the wine there's kosher ways to make wine as well.
Absolutely. But you're right about that. There should be a sort of relationship with what you're consuming. I think this is true for life in general, but also it may be especially true for like like what I would think of as symbolic offerings. I know they're not 100% symbolic. They undergo an alchemical process, which I'll let you talk about with words. But I think that there has to be a relationship with those things. I think they can't just come from Walmart. They can't just be like whoever's grapes grown in like whatever country. I think it's specific. I think that using the sort of traditional formulation is probably the best way to go in most cases. But I think there are, maybe I'm a little more Luciferian than you, Joshua, and I just think of things like a little innovation here and there. That's okay.
Well, the thing is, and I think I made this point last night when you had to hop off, but we were talking about plants and correspondences and how they might have correspondences with different stones, spirits, hours of the day, etc. But the opposite is true too. Like there's a day and night angel for each decan. So I think when you have companion plants, you'll have a plant that grows with another one that might cure the issue that the other one causes or something like that. Like poison ivy and jewelweed was the example I used last night. And I think that that's a good example of that. But the thing is about if we're getting too distant from it though, like what if those grapes become GMO that you're getting in your wine, and it's just convenient to go to the store or Rite Aid or whatever.
Oh, you're 100% right about that. Like about the almost turning the offerings into simulacra, like to have the ritual or liturgical implements, like you're actually like you're making them fake is really what you're doing. You're not even containing any of the original property.
Exactly.
So I'm totally with you on that. Whereas no, you cannot use GMO wine for liturgy wine. would not make sense.
And that was the point I was failed to make a moment ago, was that if we change one, so let's, like we were talking about hyssop last night with the Passover lamb and stuff. Well, if we change that plant, thereby we change the following correspondences, thereby the angel that's associated with it as well. So when we make small changes to things, it has like a ripple effect to the heavens. If you believe that your ritual on earth is have an effect in heaven, vice versa, then any little change we make is changing that recipe, so to speak. So, I mean, if you do make a change and it works, then I understand, of course, that's just scientific, of course. But so there might be ways you can substitute, like just when you're cooking, for instance, sometimes you can substitute and still get good results. But you know, there's a lot of times there are those prescribed methods too, and I just think that those should not be discounted because there might be a reason they're established the way they are, you know. So like, for instance, if the intention with the feast days, what'd you say?
No, I was just saying I totally agree with you, Joshua, about you have to use the prescribed, whatever the text says to do or whatever you're doing, like you have to follow that method. If you deviate too far away from it, like even in little ways, but also applying that to our life, like you gave the perfect example. So if you deviate too far away from like the prescribed method, you are actually affecting metaphysical change. Now, can you think of that as affecting heaven? Sure. You can also think of it as affecting your own karma and then our collective karma. So let's think that's interesting, but I think you framed it perfectly. I just wanted to add that.
Well, and that individual and collective karma thing is an interesting topic to bring up too, because that's a really big deal in the Orthodox Church. Is it's like the weight of all the forefathers and that sort of thing, which is also a very Judaic concept, because we have the concept of Hashem, which is to share in the fame of the name. name of the house or whatever it might be. Your reputation, in other words, is kind of tied to that as well. So yeah, we should be careful what we teach and so on and so forth, because they can become a heresy in the church, right? And then the next thing you know, you're the next what is it, Arius or I don't know. There's all sorts of famous heresies, but and a lot of them I think were silly too, because one of the famous heresies was about the Trinity, and another was about the filioque. And I'm thinking, look, guys, if neither of you are actually putting crowns on the heads of your parishioners, you're rearranging the deck furniture on the Titanic. You know, like, you guys are both wrong. And I think it's because we've just you know, and I used that as an example the other night, was it's like a tree that's been grafted, you know. The roots are Judaic, but we've put a totally different tree on top of it now, and it sprouts, you know, Christmas ornaments and stuff instead of figs or whatever it should have been originally.
No, you're 100% right. But I will point out that I did a live stream, not last night, but on Christmas Day, I believe. Yes, Christmas Day. And with Nick and Ethan and Headless. And so one thing that Nick brought up, which I thought was interesting, which I've always noticed myself, is that the Christmas colors are very Kabbalistic. There is like a deep, like, there's a Netzach theme. Obviously, you have a tree. That's very, it's just because of its coloration. It's sort of like what can contain Malkuth, if you want to say that, like the bark. It's and it grows up to the crown. So there's just something very Netzach about the whole, like, red, green, and gold elements. But then you can also express, like, the whole tree in many of the ways. And then if you add in blue, well, then you're getting something really interesting, really metaphysical, really magical. So I just want to point that out too.
Well, and see, this is it, man, because what you just described, those are the same colors we use in alchemy, the red and the green, and then we're using alchemical language here. Green is usually the vitriol, the red's the rubedo. Now, blue doesn't necessarily appear in alchemy, except it does appear alongside mentions of the law. In Hebrew, the priests wore blue trim on their robes, and blue was always associated with the divine law of heaven because of the blue sky. So we do see.
Sorry, Joshua, I just want to say this. It is interesting that the sky can be either the night sky or the day sky. It can be either turquoise or lapis lazuli. It can be dark or it can be light, but both of those things are essentially clear, like ice. So I just wanted to point that out, that Ramek does talk about this.
Oh, and to add to that, because I've went so deep into the Passover stuff and the crucifixion. So Passover and the crucifixion occurred on Good Friday, which was also the Sabbath, but also a full moon. The color of the night sky on a full moon is actually midnight blue. So it would differ from, like, the color of the sky on, like, a new moon night, for instance, because the full moon's actually saturating the sky with UV blue light, which adds this excited energy throughout the sky that's not normally there. So that is kind of and then we have the blood of Christ at the same time. So you got that red and blue type motif going on there. But you know, I would respect Christmas a lot more if we just called it what it was and treated it like the pagan holiday it is,
100%.
but also recognized it is another path or language for the same thing that we see in Christianity, Judaism. I consider them the same thing, basically, but all these other faiths have similar templates. But I do not like what is this, cultural appropriation? Is that what they call it? Where we start borrowing things, because this is the issue that they had with the back in the OG days was over time. See, it seems innocent and innocuous at first, but then over time, traditions of man start to take over, and it makes these changes that erode things. And I think I mentioned this the other night. We were talking about the concept of the museum Fremen. So like you're saying, it becomes fake over time. So, imagine the differences in the priests of Yahweh's temple back in the day versus even just like an Orthodox priest today. That Orthodox priest believes beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is in the right. No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
But
the dangers of Tiferatic consciousness.
Right? Yeah. Love of the law in a sense. But but do they understand that their iconostasis before the altar is mimicking the veil of the temple? Are they aware that their altar is mimicking the Holy of Holies? Are they aware that they are vainly attempting to model their church after the temple? And because they're not doing these things, we're missing out on all the symbolism. We don't see pomegranates on top of the pillars. We don't see, which represent the commandments and the laws. Instead, we see saints all over the place. And
let's talk about the saints though, because I have some
Sure.
interesting thoughts, and I know you do as well. So, in your opinion, do you think the saints, is that Roman imperial? So my theory is that it's Roman imperial religion, basically ancestor worship, not necessarily bad, but just something that people had done and clearly was done at the higher echelons of Roman elite society. And so this became integrated into the Church of Rome, I guess we'll say. And so was basically part of the Pax Romana. That's basically my understanding. If that's wrong, Joshua, please tell me. But that's my my underlying framework.
Well, I probably lack the historical knowledge to debate that, but just from my intuitive answer, what I would say is, yes, you're correct. It is more of a state religion in that case, or it's veering into that direction. It's like a veneration of the founders. Forefathers, so on and so forth. And one of the things that they really like to play up in the church was the succession of the apostles, the laying on of hands and passing on of the Holy Spirit through the generations. They claim they had an unbroken chain of that. And that's something that bothered me too, because I felt like if that were true and they really were full of the Holy Spirit, why can't they see the things that are so obvious to me? And instead they're like, that's the blind leading the blind. The reason they need their hand on the next person's back is because they don't know where they're going. And so I kind of thought that it's like, well, you guys lost the connection somewhere in the line, we've seen it pass from, Moses and Aaron to their sons, or Aaron's sons rather, and the Levites then pick up the lineage. And it's like, well, how are the church fathers of today connected to the Levite priests? If they're not, then they're not priests. And if they're instead deriving their authority from Pentecost and the time of the prophets being dispersed, okay, well, that's okay. Pentecost, the Spirit descended into the room, it rested upon everybody, and we're passing on that now. Okay, I get that too. But I still don't think we should unhinge ourselves from Judaism and, try to like create a separate religion. To me, that was kind of strange. And I see the saint stuff as also kind of an attempt at replacing the angels. Each day has a saint with it, which if they had if they had a negative person paired with it, maybe like you had a saint and anti-saint, I think that would actually be a better way to, I mean, if you're going to do it wrong well. And have like, okay, in this story, we got Antiochus Epiphanes representing your dark angel, and Judah Maccabee representing your angel of the day. And this is the Maccabee story that we're pulling this from. Okay, at least at that point, it's self-service, and you're. But I think should we be replacing angels with mortals? We're in Scripture. It's said that we will eventually do that, yes, and that we will judge the angels. But has that happened yet? So I sometimes wonder if they're like getting ahead of themselves by doing stuff like that. But then again, they can kind of justify it and like, well, we're each living stones for the temple. That's very Masonic as well. I mean, they see it the same way. So I can kind of appreciate what they're saying is like the church is built on the martyrs, and church life is suffering. You said death, I think earlier, maybe, but when I was going, they were always like telling us how it's suffering and stuff. And I think part of the reason that we're suffering is because we're not recognizing the realities and truths that are there, so there's a little bit of confusion probably mixed in there too, because if you don't understand why you're doing something, you could misconstrue it as suffering, because you might be bringing some of the suffering on yourself by being in error, and because here's a question I would pose to like an Orthodox person, for instance. It's like, well, define what a sin is, because what I think a sin is and what a sin actually is might be two different things, because sin's actually defined in the Old Testament. We're told what sin is. So if we make up in our own mind what sin is, we might think we know, but if we're actually in error, then you see what I mean? We're kind of inviting punishment onto ourselves. Like, for instance, eating pork is a great example. A lot of Christians just don't see why we shouldn't have to eat pork, and they really like pork. And I'm thinking, well, but if you're obedient, and I think that's the true essence of this, is obedience, because that's what leads me back to a fundamentalist understanding, is this obedience. And I sometimes wonder, it's like, well, are they lacking obedience? Because a lot of these people seem like good folks. So I often wonder, is it like the shepherd effect, where we just follow who's in front of us and we don't think about it? But that leads me to thinking about the Judas goat phenomena, because shepherds will use a goat to lead other animals, including sheep, to the slaughter. And then the goat is spared to just repeat the cycle over again. So whether they're heifers, lambs, whatever the animal might be, their purpose is to do that. So Judas did that to Christ, for instance. And so I sometimes wonder, some of these priests, even if they mean well, I kind of view Paul in this light as well. Like, I think he meant well, but I think because of his teachings, and kind of, he became like the lawless one in a way, teaching full right-hand path, knowing better himself, being a Jew. He should have been like, there should have been like very few people other than him that would have understood the reconciliation, been like, Christ was just teaching us to follow the law, and so on and so forth. But instead we like reinvent the religion, and now we have saints and everything else. And I think, well, that kind of weakens the magic too of prayer, because now we got people praying to saints when, well, shouldn't you be, I mean, not necessarily praying to angels, but like when I do pray to God, I will ask for like the appropriate angel. Or if I'm ignorant of which one I need, I'm like, I'll tell God, like, hey, here's my needs, and you can dispatch whichever angel you think is appropriate. Obviously doing it, if you already know who you want, you can do it during a certain hour of the day, wearing a certain color shirt or whatever it might be that whatever you're pouring into that. But if you don't know, I've found too that it's just as effective to petition the Lord. I look at it all as paperwork, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to fill out this form and submit it, and but I don't pretend it's a saint that's coming to help me.
100%. I totally get it. Okay, so this is a very interesting conversation. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, considering the planetary, hourly, and whatever astrological considerations for the angel that you're invoking, like, that's more, in my opinion, that would be much more magical. Like, that would be like, intentionally, I'm a magician, I'm going to do this. Now, the saint stuff is interesting, because I also think from a folk magic perspective, there are certain saints that have some kind of potency. Now, when I say saints, am I meaning that they're all people necessarily, or the spirits of people? Not necessarily, but I think that there's some that are, and I think there's others that are more of a a thought form, we'll say. But I think that word also gets overused, so I'm not saying it necessarily in the exacting way. But this is the thing, Joshua. So when I was really interested in Sinister Catholicism personally, I always they would always reinforce this idea of like you need Saint Michael or you need Saint Cyprian of Antioch. But then I realized that there's actually a lot of left-hand path saints. So I've never actually even spoken about this on my show or anyone else's. So first time. But there's actually a lot
Whoop,
of
whoop.
left-hand path saints. There's Saint Lucy, there is of Syracuse, there is Saint Margaret of Antioch, very famous. Holds the hammer and a pet demon that she has enchained. Usually, sometimes she's fighting a dragon. I'm trying to think of other ones. Oh, Saint George, very common left-hand path saint.
Yeah.
And Joan of Arc, very common left-hand path saint. And obviously, this is more of a Afrosyncretic way, but I don't think they were just totally low IQ when they looked at it. I think they actually had some understanding, and they also had a lot of them had mulatto, like French black background, and they were a part of the French Masonic lodges in Haiti. A lot of them, or their fathers were. So there was clearly like some kind of relationship between those syncretisms, not always. And I think that's also something that you're kind of getting at. You're like, do people remember the art or science of signs and symbols? And I also spoke about this with Patrick Moise. Is like, have we completely forgotten it? And I would posit that yes, to a large degree, we have forgotten or lost the transmission. It's talking about apostolic succession. We have lost a lot of the transmission of knowledge. Now, do I think that Buddhism is the the OG one true Dharma, the one true truth? Yeah, I do, but that's not to an exclusion of anything else. And I can also but Dharma doesn't even see itself as the singular truth. It sees itself as like the primordial truth, but then also like there are many refractions of the truth in the world. And sometimes people can actually rebuild the seeds just from a single spark. And so I do think that there is something interesting with that as well. Is like, yeah, you might have a degraded system. We are leaving Kali Yuga, we'll say, in a more conventional way, although I personally think we've left it basically. But okay, so we're leaving this era of degradation. A lot of the seeds are dead. A lot of them are they cannot germinate, but some of them can. And in the degradation, you have to kind of look at the seeds and see what is left. So I don't know if that's interesting for you at all to what you're saying, but it is things that I think about when you're speaking.
Yeah, man. A couple thoughts came to my mind while you were talking about that. Well, the first thing I'll say is that I think probably the more correct way to view the saints and angels relationship thing is that each of these saints are probably more realistically avatars for the respective angels that they get. And I think that because that's overlooked, we're probably getting an incomplete picture of things. And they could even be combinations of angelic
100% combos.
Influence. Yeah, exactly. Because it's really about the
true alchemist, like a true magician. I just want to say that you do think of it like truly, you look at it like a real alchemist would look at it. That's not something common that people would see that there's an aggregation of consciousness there that is manifest as the same, but it can also be multiple. That's very interesting. That's very deep, actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's just how I naturally think. I don't normally look at things and assume that they're contradictory. I always try to synthesize or compromise it. If it can be reconciled, I like to reconcile it because there's often wisdom that comes from like the clash of two things. Even if they're different, there can be something that comes from that. Kind of like the particle accelerators way of doing things. It's like sometimes all that stuff that flies out of there, it's like, oh, that was kind of insightful. But so I like to collide ideas together in that way a lot of times and see what comes out. But as far as this was concerned, I think that that's probably what's happening here is we're looking at the fruits of the spirit. And these cases with saints, they were people that had obtained a crown because they all have halos in the pictures, right? And so I think when you obtain that crown, now you're part of Hashem. You're part of the body of Christ. And, you know, everybody's got different proportions of the Holy Spirit and Sephiroth. So therefore, they each got their own distinct, just like your chart, you know, same angelic soup. Every saint's got their own flavor of angelic soup. So we all got these imprints of angelic, you know, power, so to speak, within us, but in different ways and different proportions. And Corinthians talks about the gifts in a way that I think relates well, where the hand and the foot are different, yet both important, so on and so forth. So I kind of view the saints in that way. They all kind of balance each other out in different ways and have different abilities. There's even some that like float and stuff like that. But I think where their error is that they're failing to recognize the angelic truths. You know, a third of the angels fell, but 2/3 didn't. So why are we not recognizing those 2/3 angels, at least alongside these saints? But instead we've replaced the angels with these saints in a sense too. So I think that creates a cloudiness in our understanding too, because you know, maybe prayer could be a lot more powerful if it were being, you know, if we're actually using the sigils or the names of these angels rather than the substitution, so to speak. So not to discount saints. I mean, I think it's cool and all, but I do agree. I think it's a form of like ancestor worship. But again, it's nothing new. The Judaic version of this is Hashem. So it could be viewed in that light and maybe not have went into error. I don't know. Maybe because the Jews don't do that with the saints, but they do recognize like tzaddiks and things like that. So, I mean, they're kind of doing the same thing in a lot of ways, but it's like not as extreme maybe. But even a lot of them don't recognize the angelic stuff as much. But I think that as a magician or a practitioner of that sort of stuff, a great deal of wisdom can be obtained in that way. So, you know, if you got a job interview coming up, maybe you try to schedule it at a certain time on a certain day and wear a certain color and so on and so forth. And in that way, you're getting that like assistance from the angel / saint, whatever it might be. But see, I think that's the more realistic way of doing it and approaching it. And you'd probably get better results with that. But who knows? So if anybody's listening to this and they pray to saints, do a little bit of an experimentation and try figuring out the angel instead and seeing what happens. But I did want to mention one more thing because I'm afraid I might forget if I don't. The Buddhist thing you commented on, the Buddhism. There's a lot of parallels too between Buddhism and mystic Christianity. Because the fig tree is where Buddha obtained enlightenment, under the Bodhi tree. And you'll see the fig tree in Genesis. It's the tree of knowledge. That's responsible for the fall of man. It appears again without fruit, with fruit in Genesis, without fruit in the Gospels. And then it's cursed from the root up by Christ for being not fruitful and having leaves only. And then again, in Revelation, the fig tree is mentioned in chapter 6 when it's shaken by a mighty wind or the Holy Spirit, and it shakes its fruit, whether it's ripe or not. And the Greek church did have a fig tree planted outside, by the way. And so I did learn that, of course, it depends on the species of the fig, but figs are generally ripe around the end of October through November. And so in a kind of a vague way, and that twilight language kind of way, we're even being given seasons here. So we know in Genesis there had to be fruit on the tree. We know in the Gospels there wasn't fruit on the tree, so it certainly must have been earlier in the season, right? And then we see in Revelations there is fruit on the tree, and it gets shaken off whether it's ripe or not. So that would indicate like October, which is around the time of Judgment Day. So I think a lot of the mystery that we hear about a lot in the Orthodox Church, it's like, guys, there wouldn't be so much mystery if you would just combine the Old Testament and the New Testament together. because the mystery comes from the fact that they've separated them so much, and the clergy wants to stand in the way and act like they know everything, when in fact they have an incomplete understanding of it. And I think personally that's very dangerous from a spiritual perspective, because in Zechariah 11, for instance, it talks about shepherds, and it says that if you're leading your God's sheep astray, he will bring the sword upon your right arm and your right eye, and he'll make it dark. Well, who does that remind you of? Odin, of course. And so he'll make you left-handed. If you're doing your own thing and you're an idle shepherd, well, he'll make you that. But here's where I think it's interesting as well, because as much as I've tried to have a right-handed approach, my left-handed nature, I think, has melded with it. And because I've had dreams and stuff of, for instance, I've been handed a Vajra before in a dream. I didn't even know what it was. I don't study anything like that. Well, I do now, but at the time I had no idea what it was, So I think sometimes these things can be so similar, and our practice can be as such that we're led into some things too. Like this is Vajrayana translates to path of fruit, or the fruitful path. And that's what the practice of Christianity is all about, is becoming fruitful, right? And bearing fruit. And so it's like, well, what path do you go up that tree to be fruitful? And what fruit is it? And that's what really made me start looking at this snake and stuff, because I wanted to see, when that sword descends from Keter to Malkuth, what is the actual path? What is the actual path of that serpent that's going up the tree? And of course, I think of Genesis with the serpent in the tree and all those things. I know I kind of went all over the place, but
no, not at all.
I just wanted to kind of make the point that even things I haven't studied, or it wasn't even in my canon of understanding, things have come to me, and I've been able to synthesize and integrate them. And that's, of course, what Vajra is all about, is the synthesis of opposites. And I think that's what gives the Vajra so much power, is that it's two poles united, essentially. And therefore it creates a channel of energy, a circuit of sorts. And see, when I was handed that Vajra, there was also a word spoken. It was Shem. And I didn't know what that meant either. And I thought, what is going on here? So I started spending time researching Shem and Vajras. And I might have shared this with you in the past, but one of the distinct features about the Vajra was that it wasn't open-tined like Indra's or some of the Anunnaki-looking ones, or the Sumerian ones. It was closed tines, so that they had been bent inward. And there's a story about how Indra's Vajra had the tines bent inward by it's a figure named Buddha, but it's not the Buddha of Buddhism. It's like Buddha of Hinduism. There's a character named that, I guess, another deity. It's like Mercury or something like that.
Mm-hmm. It's the planet, the planet Mercury.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because as I'm sure you know, Joshua, that in Vajrayana, we do use the closed tines. So
exactly.
they're almost always closed. Now, there is something interesting with Japanese esoteric Buddhism, and I've had 2 shows on that, so people can go listen to this. It's episode 4 and then a bonus with Jigoku Keiki, who is my actual Twitter friend. So they don't always use the closed tines, but we do in Tibetan Buddhism. So there's something really fascinating about what you're saying. And even the number, actually, there's an inner outer secret dialectical meaning if there's a different number, between 5 and 9. So something really interesting with that. There's even 3 as well, 3 and 4 prongs, but there with a 4 prong one, you would say that that's actually 5 prongs. So again,
because of the center one, because there's one in the middle, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's always a center pillar. That's always the secret thing in Tantra. The secret. I always laugh when I have to say the secret third thing, because it's never really the third thing.
Yeah, cover all your bases.
It's actually always the 5th thing is the secret thing. So But no, there's
Well, that tracks well though, because the fifth, that's the quintessence. The spirit is usually the fifth element.
So the essence of Vajra is really the transmutation of all four elements. That's what it's even used for as a implement. It's taking like all the aggregates out of fire. It's taking all the aggregates out of water. So there's no like salt. It's just pure, 100% pure, whatever that is. And then there's obviously other associations with it, psychological, like different maras, different skanda aggregates, like all these different things, like emotions, all that stuff. And then you have to disaggregate earth, which is like a little more challenging. And then you have to take all of those three things, and then you have to make of it into air. So you have to take the pure elements, the three pure things, just like a 13 kind of, or a 4. And so it's the 3 plus 1. So then you make the air, and then with the air, you have to aggregate again, and then you create a sound. Just like how you were referring to before, is the primal cause, or the first cause, is that a thought? Is that sound? Is that light? Is that a word? Like there's all these different kinds of formulations for how it can be. So I think that's really interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Dude, it's cool because I figured there was probably a lot of information packed into that, and because I've read on Vajras a little bit and learned that there are different designs and stuff, but and I can't remember the exact number because at the time in my dream, the only thing I was able to really discern about it was that it was closed. Because I didn't even really notice in the dream it was opened or closed. I just, in the process of learning about the Vajras, I was like, oh, there's two different kinds. Huh? That's strange. I was like, well, it wasn't open. And then I saw the closed one. I was like, oh, man. But then I didn't know how many tines it had. I thought, of course. So, yeah, there are little things like that that I don't know. But it definitely spurred me on to want to get one, because at various times in my life, I've gotten a hold of like Shiva Lingam stones, Rude Shaka beads, which I know the chambers in those can have different significance depending on how many, the number of them or whatever. So I know there's a lot of subtle things like that. But stupidly, I've always like given them away or whatever. And then after I was given that Vajra in the dream, I was like, oh, maybe I should have been keeping this stuff. Like, why am I being given this stuff? Because I never understood, it seemed so foreign to me. I was like, well, I don't know anything about Buddhism. Why am I getting Rudshaka beads and Shiva Lingams and Vajras? Like, this is strange. Why does it keep coming to me? I didn't understand. But then I learned, I was like, oh, if I'm an antenna, I must be tuned into that. And that's what I'm getting. And I was like, well, how am I doing it if I don't know anything about it? So like you comment, like how I think, I must be doing the thing without understanding that I'm doing it. And so in some weird left-hand way, like doing the left-hand way, even a more left-hand way, because I don't even know I'm doing it. But but what's really an intrigue to me since this happened, I heard you use the term dogery the other night, kind of interchangeably with Vajra. And one of the strange things that happened since this was my ears now ring 24/7. And I thought, well, is that what the dogery is for? Is to tune you? Is that like its purpose is to clear the space and tune you in, try to get your into that pitch? I've kind of mapped it out before on the internet. Like I've been trying to find the frequency or the pitch or the hertz that it is. And I did it once, but I forgot what it was. But it's really high pitched. And sometimes it'll stop and it'll almost have like a momentum where I'll almost stumble or get distracted because it's always there. And when it's not, it's like noticeable and it almost has like a whiplash effect. And sometimes it can get really intense and I'll get sick and I'll have to like lay down or whatever. So it's a really strange thing that's been happening since. And I wonder if maybe that had something to do with the Vajra and the dogery relationship. So I've been trying to get a hold of a Vajra, but I don't even know where to start. And I don't want to like just get one off Etsy or whatever. Like I'd like to get a real one. Well, I mean, like I want a real one though. I don't want to be a museum Fremen and have like a fake Chris knife. You know what I mean? Like
I totally get it. But there's I'll send you a link after. So I'll send you
Okay.
like a real place, like a practitioner supply that is very reasonable. So I'll hook you up. Don't worry.
Because
But
it reminds me of the story too, because I'm sure there's a prescribed, just like with everything else, there's probably a prescribed way to make these. And it reminds me of that story of the sage that uh, he drank all of the divine weapons and then they used his bones to create the Vajra. You, of course, probably know his name. I don't. But it reminds me of that story too, because the bones have like a piezoelectric kind of effect that can go along with them sometimes. Like when you do yoga and you apply this pressure and tension to your bones and muscles and tendons, you create like a piezoelectric effect too. I think the reflexology kind of does well to kind of explain how that works. But yeah, I just have to wonder. It's like, well, how did I stumble into this? You know, and then I started learning there were actually some similarities between Christianity and Buddhism, and I started to kind of get, even like was a little confused at one point. I was like, well, how is this happening? Like it made no sense to me, you know?
Because the tree is all one thing. It's the inner tree. It's the same tree. It's the same ladder. We all have to climb it if that's what we want to do, obviously. And there are a lot of similarities. I wouldn't say it's exactly one-to-one. I would say, but if you're looking at it from the way that you explain Christianity, Joshua, which is a little different than other people, how they would frame it, is that you have to look at it more in that both non-dual consciousness, but also in that like diamond thunder consciousness. So when you're feeling ill, I actually understood what you were saying, because this is something that a lot of people who are more inexperienced, and I'm not calling you inexperienced in other ways, just in maybe this one particular way, that happens because they forget to self-combust the syllable. So
Yeah.
the sound is something that you self-generate, right? Like it's something in your mind. That's what you're focused on when you're doing the Vajra. So the primordial sound is the ice, is the diamond thunder, is that turquoise like flame that's also clear and that's also white. But it has to self-combust. And so that is really the trick to doing, like to using a Vajra, because it's all about bringing it together and then letting it go. I don't know if
Okay.
that helped you at all.
No, I appreciate that, because you're right. I feel like a babe in a way, you know, like I don't understand what I'm doing with this, and because I wasn't even intending to do it. So yeah, it reminds me of like maybe how each of this, not necessarily the separa, but the klipa or whatever, there might be toxins or poisons, and so if you're not doing things in the proper proportions and balance, because alchemy is all about that too, you know, I could end up having like byproducts that are maybe causing me to feel ill or something like that, even if it's just emotive energy. And so I've tried to develop a better understanding, but because Christianity lacks that, I have to I've had to look for it, you know, because I don't understand, like, well, what's happening to me? It's like, well, I guess I stumbled into what's supposed to happen to you when you go to church. I've been given a crown, I suppose. But the diamond thunder is very important term you used, because Vajra does mean diamond and a thunderbolt.
Or adamantine is sometimes how it's often translated.
Doesn't adamantine refer to the indestructible nature?
Yes, and it can also refer to, as an alchemical thing, to meteorite iron, but not meteorite iron as it falls. Meteorite iron in production, maybe you could say even in production of a Vajra or a Dorji.
Well, that makes sense, because in the story of Vajra, he was immune to all weapons that were around at the time of, you know, he received this particular blessing. But the Vajra was a unique weapon that didn't exist. And so that was the only one that could slay Vajra. And so this meteorite ore thing falling from heaven kind of reminds me of that similarly, in that, oh, it's something novel. It's like a way God can throw a curveball. Oh, just like be careful what you wish for, mortals, summoning that Djinn. Well, even the Djinns can get fooled by God on occasion, I think, because here they're like, Vajra is like, make me impervious and nothing can harm me. But then, you know, here comes the Vajra. And he's like, what? No. And I kind of view the Vajra as like a tool too to overcome the serpent, the Kundalini, maybe. Because without it, we can't overcome it. But so I kind of viewed it that way too, is like, was I being given this to conquer the serpent, to overcome the serpent? And so I wanted to get a hold of one finally so that I could, you know, sit with it and use it in prayer and meditation. And I kind of view them as like a magic wand, really. And I even have thought about, well, what were they using them for back in the past, like the Anunnaki and these deities? Because you see them like throwing lightning and stuff with them. And I kind of think this might be where the lightsaber kind of comes from in Star Wars lore. But not, just like you said, the undeserving maybe can't access something. I think it's kind of like in there's some, I don't know, one of those Avenger movies where Odin speaks to Thor's hammer, is like, he doesn't have a pure heart, don't let him wield this till he's worthy, or something like that, right? And it's kind of like that. It's like, well, the Vajra in the hand of somebody that isn't able to activate it, it's totally useless, right? But in the hands of somebody maybe with a crown chakra or something like that, it's like, well, now I'm kind of thinking through it in my head, like, what did Shem mean? You know, Shem is referring to the names of God, which are angels. So could you combine Vajra and Shem Ham-Mephorash practices and call angels and direct them? And I'm starting to wonder, like,
well, that's what
got me thinking.
Right?
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. That's what the dakinis are, right? They're expressions of light in space. So that's what you're saying is like, so we have this idea. They're not as autonomous necessarily. I know the angels aren't, I mean, they're much more autonomous than the angels. They're considered to be unbound, unconventional.
Oh, you said genies. Okay, I didn't understand what you said.
Oh, sorry, I said dakini.
Okay, dakini then.
Dakini. So they are kind of our angelic beings, but they can appear very ferocious, and they're often associated with snakes. To bring it back to something that you said at the very beginning about the seraphim. Well, this is not just me self-promoting, although I don't mind doing it, is that in the Aeon of the Daughter series, which will obviously air on this feed eventually in some form, that the goddess in Tantra is actually the goddess of snake bites. Treating snake bites is one of her primary original functions. So, and she is a Dakini queen, meaning that she kind of rules over them, but it's not rules over them with fear. It's not rules over with them with control. It's rules over them with love. It's interesting. So anyways, yeah, but then also I wanted to say this because you brought up the crown chakra. The only one who can really wield a Dorji or a Vajra is someone who has successfully mastered what we would think of as all 5 gates, all 5 chakras. They spin, they're synchronous, they work together, and the 3 channels are unobstructed. That's the real way. So, and I agree with you that that's exactly how Padmasambhava, who is sort of like our Jesus messianic figure, I guess, he did tame the serpent. In fact, that's his a major part of his biography is that he goes to Bhutan, what I think it might be Tiger Peak actually, and he stands there with his Vajra. He does also hold a Kila, so that might be interesting for you, but I digress. So he uses the Vajra and the Kila both. But before he confronts the dragon, he actually has to confront what we'll call a dark mother goddess, a very ferocious primordial goddess that existed for thousands of years, maybe fallen as a star. And she was the guardian of this valley. And so he did not have a Kila at this point in the story, but he did have his Dorji or his Vajra. So what he did was he took the Vajra and he spun it in his hand. So the 4 + 1 making the 5, the primordial sound, which she also is, something that she speaks. But he recognized in her that because she had physical eyes, she could never fully let go of the pleasures, what we would call bliss consciousness, that was available to her on the ocean of blood, that which she also produced. So he throws the Vajra and it blinds her over material eyes. But at that moment, her third eye opens and she is able to see in spectral light. So she recognizes what we would say is who she is and her true name only at that moment. And then she realizes that it actually is okay. I can stay down here as this form, but I can also rise up in consciousness. That's also what the dakinis are. They are the luminous expressions that have to rise through the carnal ground, like almost an alchemical process. They have to filter through the tree, through the roots of the trees, little shards of light through the darkness, and then they express out. They don't all become enlightened, but through the practices, through being on the carnal ground, and through experiencing what we would call non-dual view, because she is the sound without view, that which does not, it doesn't have a, it's not in a rightward or a leftward direction. It just is pristine, but it's also ferocious because it's primordial. So we have to learn to sort of like integrate those ideas, and like the one of her sort of offices, I guess you could say, it's an imperfect way to describe it, is the secret mantra, because she is the words like of the secret mantra. She's not separate from that. She is that, and it's also from her. So it's like very, I know it's very dialectical. You can think of like the figure eight, like a Vajra. Like you can think of it very similarly, how all of our Vajras are dual. So not all Iranian Vajras are dual, actually. But
Oh
Buddhist
yeah,
ones.
yeah. I think I've seen them just one-sided before.
So that would be like you're putting out your life force. So the whole idea of Buddhism is that you're kind of rectifying your life force, rectifying the tree inside you, rectifying the spheres or the chakras or the spinning wheels inside you with the Dorji. But then also once you're able to sort of purify the Dorji, you're able to sort of be like, okay, I don't really have this desire to externalize it. I can just use it for purification for the environment, because once you purify yourself, the idea is that also the environment through the elemental purification will also become purified. So again, it's very alchemical.
So are the Dojri or Vajra even actually necessary, or are they kind of like ritual aids to achieve these ends?
Well, this is very interesting, Joshua, because very high master, who is not me, they might say that it is a ritual implement that doesn't matter. However, we do know that there were great masters who highly valued their magical tools. And like Padmasambhava, the example I gave, well, eventually he was able to upgrade and he became a dual wielder of the Kila, so the Diamond Thunder knife, which is also known as a peg, which is also like a tent peg, but it can also be like it's a triangular shaped blade. In fact, very similar to what a pyramid would be if you made a pyramid into a knife. Sort of like a lock and a key. And that's also one of the ideas. It is like a key to unlock the primordial reality. So I would say, because there are alchemical ways to derive them, you can make them through meteorite, they can be made of certain wood, they can have certain deities, but it's all related to either the Bhairavas or the Vajrakilaya himself, the Diamond Thunder sun. Now, why I say this is because I think that for you as a Christian hermeticist, it's interesting that we also have this idea of like a forged adamantine sun, but he's not Tiferet consciousness. That's really the big difference, is that it goes more a little bit. I've been joking around on Twitter about trans-Plutonian and trans-Uranian, but there is an element of him that is very trans-Plutonian, because he is adamantine. He is like that shining Vajra, like single-pointed, like the tip is often depicted as shooting lightning into the world, or lightning into the key, the not the key, the lock. So I just think that there's something It's something very interesting. I agree with you that there's definitely a relationship. I feel like we didn't even talk about like half the things that you wanted to, and I
Yeah,
apologize
exactly.
right
Well,
now.
I think we did probably half, but yeah, I mean, you said it leaves some room for future
Well, I
content.
would love you to come on in the future, and of course you're going to, and of course we are going to do a Resident Evil episode. So I just want to point that out is even in my what we'll call a long-winded introduction of you, that was one of the things I really appreciated about you is that you could see my broader project was integrating like these kind of anime realist. Shout out Joe Nally. This kind of like NRX like mythopoesis, but they don't call it that. They call it parafiction or chronopoesis or speculative ontology. That's all their words. I like those words, obviously. But yeah, I think it's kind of like a blending with chaos magic, with Buddhism, with Freemasonry, humble masonry, we'll call it, with Telema, with Gnosticism. Like I'm looking, I'm looking and cooking. So I definitely want you back, Joshua. Please come back, and we'll have multiple shows. I mean, we don't have to. We can be broad. It's okay.
Well, and something that came to mind there as you were talking, you mentioned there was a lady that worked with serpent bites and venom and was curing it, and that reminded me of how I've read this about lamb's blood is used in the production of anti-venom for snake bites.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something unique about the lamb's blood that allows it to be like an excellent, I guess, a carrier or base for the anti-venom. And then also you mentioned something about the primordial goddess that the gentleman with the Vajra had to confront and how it might have been a fallen star. Well, that reminded me of the tarot card for star 17. And you had also related 17 to Babylon. So I was wondering if maybe that could be representative of one and the same. Could Babylon be the same Black Mother type thing in a sense? Because in Revelation, we got the dragon and that all those same motifs coming around too. You know, so it's like everybody's personal apocalypse is to stare down the dragon and slay him.
So
but
I want to
and
answer that. I just want to answer that
yeah,
quickly,
sure, go
Joshua,
ahead.
just because I think it'll be really interesting for anyone who's listening who may believe unfoundedly that I follow some kind of dark mother Vajra path, which is incorrect. We recognize her as a Barbelo grandmother, as kind of the empress, if you will, of the Dakinis. She produces them. They are not all her. Yes, you can say that she is the primordial consort, meaning that if you want to call it God's original consort, that she fell and created like through the pleroma and created matter. But it's also not her. It's also like she has different stages of consciousness. She has different names and different expressions. And so you can also say that when she fell to the very bottom of the tree. Like how some people say Yesod and Lilith are connected, but it's not really Yesod. It's kind of the dark side of the moon or the Klepoth of the moon. And then she's down there. That you could express it like that. And there's definitely tantras that express it very similarly, where she has 6 heads or 11 animal heads. There's even ones like that, and she's a crookback, so you can even see how the roots would be slightly crooked, or like a lightning strike, it would be like a little crooked, like how lightning strikes often are. So she could say that. You could say that she stands upright and then fills all the Sephira or all the Klepoth. But really, her expression, and this is getting to the point about Babylon is really, I'm very fond of this comic book because I can tell what they're actually saying, but it's Vampirella. Vampirella is really Babylon. Vampirella is when
I remember her.
right, she is the one who climbs through hell as a singular being, as a singular Dakini, unenlightened at the beginning, ignorant at the first path. She climbs through the hells of the world and she arises on the earth. And then she has to also climb all the way to the crown. She can only do this by either taming the dragon or becoming possessed by it. Very simple tantric story, but I think it has a lot of meaning. And then you also can say that for every magician, he has his dakini, whether that is embodied in an actual woman or one of these angels that are non-dual.
Yeah.
So they're a little
Basically,
more ferocious.
Your anima, your animus, so to speak. It's like
Mhm.
you're familiar in a sense.
Mhm.
When you were describing her, it reminded me of Tiamat from the Sumerian as well.
It's clearly the same goddess. I mean, it's Chandika, it's Chamunda, it's Ekajati. That's how we call her in Buddhism, the one braid, because that's what happened to her when she was blinded. She had multiple heads. She pervaded all the darkness of reality. That's how it's said, like the chaos, the primordial chaos. But when she was blinded, she became singular, single pointed. And even I was reading, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else, but they were sending me some material on curse tablets. And the word for Greek, which I'm forgetting now, is actually synonymous with fang. Well, that's really interesting in terms of Ekajati as this kind of Tiamat or like Babylonian kind of goddess figure, because she only has one fang, and it's a downward pointing triangle, and it's considered to be a wolf's. So I was thinking, well, that makes sense actually, because she is like the wrathful word, the wrathful mantra, not necessarily written down. We would differentiating it like that in Buddhism, but there's a very similar concept there. So you're throwing the curse tablets into the ocean of blood or the ocean of fire, which is often what they would do with the curse tablets. And so it's a very antinomian, transgressive action. But when she's blind of material reality, then things can just act without cause, meaning that she does not have to apply her will to things happening. So I would say that this is like the interrelated story. This is like the story that links them all. But the interesting thing about Buddhism, and of course I am a Dharma supremacist, so take it for what it's worth, Joshua. It's not, and I'm not subjugating or effacing anyone. It just, we offer the higher expressions of her, who is one. We offer that a way to sort of rectify within yourself. And also, interestingly, the consort always rectifies all paradox. So all alchemical, esoteric, Kabbalistic, dialectical errors, they can all be rectified through the consort. So that was an idea, actually, I was thinking about pre-recording when you were telling me you wanted to discuss how the Norse tree could be rectified. And one of my ideas was, I wonder if it can be, and I'm not saying it can or can't, but I think this interesting because there is a lack of female deities in the Norse pantheon, and we would consider it a must, like how 2 is a prime number. We would consider it like a must to have that kind of rectification.
Well, you might want to consider the fact that in some of those stories, Thor, for instance, dresses up as a woman. So in some of these cases, the deity might be its own consort, which is something that played out in the Elden Ring video game I was mentioning earlier. There's like a goddess figure in that game, and she has a husband, but in the game, you actually realize she married herself. But then she had this outward facing male figure that she would go lead military campaigns with, but actually ruled from the throne as like a queen. It was a really weird story, honestly, but it reminds me a lot of what you're saying here, like with a consort, because he's referred to as a consort. It's Radagon and Marika. They like split, but then when they combine, it's like some type of divine, more divine essence. And I think this is kind of where the tradition in play acting came from, of taking on the opposite gender or something. That was thought to the gods and goddesses a lot of times would do things like that, and they would have like the opposite qualities in them as well or something, because it somehow gave them access to that divinity. Because I guess in the original form, it was Adam and Eve, for instance, right? Not split. And I know we're kind of getting close to the 2-hour mark, so I don't want to go on and on, but we were starting to wade into the territory of Evangelion, because like this dark mother figure star that falls to the bottom of the tree, I was thinking like, dude, how is this any different than Evangelion with Lilith living at the core of the earth?
Yes. Yes.
Might be a good place to end. And because it can pick
Okay.
up really easily from there next time if you like.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So thank you so much, Joshua. Do you want to plug your Twitter? And also you have done a lot of work. You have done actually, you're like quite a podcasting. You have more maybe podcasting experience than me. And I'm not insignificant in my output. So if you want to plug any episodes or appearances, plus your Twitter and any contact you want me to include in the show notes, of course I will, but plug it for everybody now.
Certainly, and I do apologize that it's not all consistently branded because I'm not monetized, and I, a lot of my different aliases I've had to cover like certain topics. So if you want to find like news and like news through the lens of the Bible and scripture and things like that, you can look me up on YouTube as NPC 3.14. And I did a lot of shows with my friend Erin Moffat. So her channel is called Abby Someone. We had to make a new channel because our original channel got taken down in the midst of the meme war, 2017-18 era. But so if you want to find that type of content, I underestimated how many shows we did. I guess we did more like 60. I thought it was more like 30, but you can find a lot of the content for that on Odyssey, YouTube. I think we even did a little bit on Vimeo or BitChute. And then if you want to find like religious type stuff, I usually do that under the moniker of The Branch, Joshua The Branch, something like that. So you can find me on Symbolic Studies channel, Michelle's Healing Home. I did some episodes also with the Interverse with Chance Garton. I did some episodes with the Weaving Spiders. And so I usually use The Branch for those things. And let me see, what's the other name? Oh, on Twitter, you can find me as William Birkin. I think that's W Birkin Umbrella if you're looking for the username. That's a pretty easy way to get a hold of me. And I also have an Instagram. It's it used to be Appalachian Aesthetic, but I changed it recently to Apocalyptic Aesthetic because I thought, well, I'm always talking about the end of the world and stuff like that. So not the black pill, because obviously things turn out well at the end. So, but yeah, I was like, maybe I should rebrand that. So I'm a little bit all over the place, but I am intending to maybe make a link tree.
That would be great.
Can I at least put everything in one spot, and then I'll slowly over time work on getting like one moniker to rule them all. But for now, kind of all over the place. So you can thank Big Brother for that, all the censorship.
Well, I appreciate you, Joshua. Thank you so much for coming on. You have an open door. Please come back to discuss Resident Evil Evangelion, although you will have to fight Mark Vallon, Mark Cherish Mutual, and guests, former guests, and future guests on the show, and also on Call Rejects. So shouting out to that show, which will air in a month or so, for coming on and tolerating me and all my esoteric nonsense, which I know you also enjoy. So that's why I call you my equal, because we can get into the thick of it and just be weaves, like magic weaves together.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, I can't find this in my community. I would have to travel quite a distance to enjoy some conversation like this, so it's quite a treat.